Cops of Reddit. What is the stupidest criminal you have ever met? I'm a 911 dispatcher in Florida. Sometimes confused or drunk people knock on the wrong door or try to get into a house thinking it's theirs, but it isn't. It's an honest mistake. But the homeowner is rightfully very afraid, thinking they're about to be robbed or worse. Well, I had this kid, must have been in his early 20s and clearly stoned, call me going absolutely crazy that someone is trying to unalive him and take his property and assault his girlfriend, blah blah blah. I send units code 3 to this guy thinking it's a burglary in progress. Turns out, the guy ordered a pizza and forgot about it. Scared the delivery guy half to death. I'm surprised the delivery guy was still there. That's either a dedicated pizza company or just a very fast response time. Either way, those are two big pluses. Unfortunately for them, it didn't work out. Story 2. My mom's cousin was a bank robber. The time he got caught, he went into a bank, scoped the place out, left to go back on his bike. This dude robbed banks on a bike. He put the mask on, robbed the bank. Police see the tape and see that the bank robber was wearing the exact same clothes as the guy who left less than a minute ago. And that was that. Story 3. Took a vehicle burglary report where the victim found a driver's license sitting on her driver's seat that the suspect must have left behind. Seems damning, but if he had any criminal smarts, he would just say that his license was stolen and the thief must have dropped it while breaking into this new victim's vehicle. Without any other evidence, the case would have gone nowhere. The next day, I take a report at a church that was a couple blocks away from the vehicle burglary. This guy stole the video cameras from the building. He must have thought the footage came with the camera because when we checked the video, there was a high-def close-up of the suspect's face as he removed the camera. Good evidence, sure, but I still didn't know who the guy was, until I looked at the license I collected the day prior and saw it was the exact same guy. Yeah, this is a pretty stupid criminal. Just not understanding a multitude of things and leaving the license behind? Why would you even take your license with you if you're about to commit a crime? I feel like that's just a bad idea in general. Story 4. My dad is a cop, and I remember that he called me one night and said that he wanted to tell me how he was glad that I'm not as stupid as the guy he arrested that night. An idiot high schooler was caught stealing alcohol after his fake ID was rejected. His fake ID said he was born in 2001. 3 years younger than he actually was. Poor guy couldn't work out why his ID didn't work. My dad recommended that he pay better attention in math class. Story 5. Not a cop myself, but about 10 years ago I got held up and robbed by a group of 3 guys with knives. All they wanted was the money in my wallet, so me being the smart guy not wanting to mess with them, just obliged. At the end of the ordeal, he put the knife to my throat and said, "If you ever tell the cops my name is name, I will slice your throat right now." So I went home, called the cops, told them where it happened, and gave them the name the guy told me. The name instantly rang a bell with them, since the guy had come into contact with the police in the past. Cops went to the spot where I was robbed, and they were laying an ambush for a new guy to appear. They could instantly identify the guy. He was arrested, and that's about it. Happened in the Netherlands. Don't know his sentence or anything. Story 6. I went to a domestic violence call where the woman claimed her husband hit her. When I asked her how it happened, she told me she couldn't provide the kind of life she wanted him to give her. She stated since he had a heart attack and got lupus, he wasn't working, so she decided she should start inviting some friends over to bang with her for money. Mind you, she's telling me, a fully uniformed officer, all of this. She says he should act as the person who handles the money for her. She then calls someone to come over and tells her husband that after she gets paid for the banging, he should hold the guy at knife point and take the rest of his money. She said he refused to help her with this, and so they got into an argument. He pushed past her to get out of the apartment, and she claimed that was the assault. I asked her if she understood she was just admitting to planning a felony crime. She looked shocked that planning an escort and robbery was wrong at all, and did not get why I wasn't arresting her husband for trying to remove himself from her stupid plan to get them both arrested. Edit. For all of those asking if I arrested her, I did not. The husband is the real hero here. Due to him refusing to being involved in anything, this plan of hers never made it off the ground. If the John had actually been invited over, I could have arrested her for an offense. I did write a report and passed it along to the robbery and vice units, as well as notifying my supervisors. Best I could do that night was separating them. I drove the husband across town to remove him from the situation. The penal code in each state differs slightly on what charges are considered arrestable while still in the planning stages. This wasn't something I could arrest on, mainly due to not having a direct victim I could point to. Basically, because this was a what-if scenario, it would have been the equivalent of me mumbling to myself I should punch that guy in the face. If the John had been invited over and/or I got the name for a possible John, I could have arrested her for it. That is certainly a way to earn money. That is one of the ways to earn money of all time, for sure. Would not recommend it, though. Story 7. Not me, but my buddy is a cop, and told me about this one kid in particular he dealt with for years. No cleverness to him. Numerous times he walked into his neighbor's garage in broad daylight and just stole his bike. constantly stole from stores in plain view, and even the occasional minor assault or burglary. He always got caught, like had never gotten away with any of his hundreds of crimes. But because he was a minor, there were never any repercussions. A few days before he turned 18, my friend and another officer went to his house, and we basically reminded him that if he does anything after that, he will face real punishment as an adult, and he will get 0 breaks. Just a last-ditch effort to be helpful. 2 days after his 18th birthday, he's caught committing an armed robbery. Pretty sure he's doing a few decades behind bars. When he turned 18, he graduated from adolescent crime to adult crime. I'm so proud of him. They grow up so fast. Story 8. Ex-LEO here. So I got a call a couple years ago from a lady who says she is being threatened. I respond to a very rural area, and she shows me her cell phone. It is a chainmail text from an unknown number. The message showed a picture of a girl with a gag in her mouth, and she's looking at the camera and holding a sign with both hands that says help. The text of the message stated she was in Amsterdam, and she didn't forward the text to 10 people, and look what happened to her now. I explained to the lady that it was a hoax and explained what a chainmail message was. She refused to believe me and became argumentative. When I offered to contact Interpol for her, she did not know what that was, and she said it wasn't good enough whatever it was, and just kept saying that the girl needed help. I asked her if she knew the girl, and she said no, and she believed the girl tried to send her the message using any made-up numbers she could instead of contacting anybody she knew. My reasoning was once again shot down, and she said again that the girl needed her help. I remember driving away and the lady screaming at me that I needed to help that girl. I responded with a single no over my PA as I quickly sped away. Both of those women were never heard from again. Now forward to 10 people. Story 9. Not a cop, but worked at a 7-Eleven in a rough part of Chicago. Had 2 guys come in and ask for 2 bottles of Grey Goose. I asked for their IDs, they handed them over, and I grabbed the 2 bottles from behind the counter to ring them up. They proceeded to grab the bottles and book it out of there, leaving their IDs on the counter. I called the police and they came in asking for a description of the thieves, and I handed them the IDs. Cops were in disbelief at the stupidity. They left and went to the address on one of the IDs that was about 2 blocks away. About 15 minutes later, they walked in with the 2 guys and the bottles of Grey Goose. Poor guys didn't even get a chance to open them. I confirmed it was them, didn't press charges, took the bottles, and went on with my overnight shift. Story 10. So I'm sitting in the station doing paperwork. I'm looking out of the window and a few yards away is a bus stop. A young lad is smashing the glass of the bus stop as a way of showing off to a couple of girls. So I sigh, walk about 20 yards over to him, and arrest him. Another time, a lad had just broken into a pharmacy and stolen some drugs, sleeping tablets, which he started taking. Maybe to hide evidence? I guess who knows how these people's minds work. There's a foot chase which gets slower and slower and slower. I ended up just walking slowly behind him. The guy fell asleep while I was booking him in. That second guy definitely thought he got something else. He was probably so disappointed and very tired. Story 11. There was a guy who sold drugs on my floor of the college dorm who wasn't the brightest. One night he was driving back to the dorm and a police car comes behind him and turns on their lights. His dumb butt stored all of his drugs in his car and assumed they were pulling him over for possession. He proceeds to drive through a red light and pull into the dorm parking lot to hide. Oh, mind you, his car was covered in bumper stickers, had a kayak rack, and a vanity plate to top it all off. The parking lot only had one entrance and exit, too. Apparently, he thought the police car wouldn't go through a red light to follow him. Long story short, they were just going to warn him for having a tail light out, and nothing more. Instead, he ended up in the local jail and expelled from college. The funniest part is that his ledger of all transactions and the dollar amount, products, and buyers was also right there in his car. He was one stupid criminal. That kid needs to watch a single cop show ever. Like, what do you mean a police car can't go through a red light? They enforce the law, they can't break it. I don't get it. Story 12. Ex-police officer here. I pulled over a dude for having a brake light out, nothing serious. I ran his plates and the like. It all came back clean and nothing seemed off, until he exclaimed, "I haven't had any alcohol," in an over-enthusiastic tone. For some reason, he thought this was a good idea, so nearly got away with it. Vodka doesn't smell. I breathalyzed him. Legal limit in England is 35. He blew over 60. Arrested on the spot and his vehicle towed. Idiot. Edit to clarify. I did not mean that vodka is odorless. What I meant by that comment was that compared to beer or wine or other alcohols, vodka is very mild. Most drunk drivers I pull either smelt of a stronger smelling alcohol or had obvious side effects of the drink, making it easy to see that they were intoxicated. Hope this clarifies a bit. Story 13. My father is a police officer. He once told me a story of a call he went to for reports of a man and a woman fighting in an apartment. Call came from neighbors for noise complaints/concern. He was third shift, so this was at some point very late at night, when all the crazy people are up and at him. When he arrived, he could hear the yelling through the door. He knocked and let them know it was the police. There was immediate silence, and a man answered the door completely naked. The naked man didn't even give my dad a chance to speak or ask questions. The first thing he said was, "I don't have a knife behind my back." Well, he definitely did have a knife behind his back. And the naked woman he was with had drugs, which was what they were fighting over. They both got arrested that night. Tip: don't do illegal drugs, and if you do, don't answer the door for cops. Story 14. Not a cop, but I used to work at a smoke shop. 3 guys broke in through a large window, left blood everywhere just trying to get in, walked right past the high-end fancy expensive glass, and proceeded to grab as many cheap Chinese bongs as possible. They went back through the window, breaking 2 or 3 bongs in the process of crawling through the tiny hole they made, probably cutting themselves even more than they already did, and hightailed it across the street. They seemed to have dropped damn near everything while running, because there was a literal trail of broken glass leading to the apartment across the street. Cops came and followed the glass trail, leading directly to someone's door. Looked over the little fence to their bottom floor balcony and saw 3 guys all cut up smoking from a broken bong. We estimated they took 8 or 9 bongs. They were smoking from the only survivor. They turned out to be regulars. Never saw him after that. Story 15. So I get a call of a beer run, shoplifting, from the local CVS. I check the area and see 2 guys matching the description. I detain them, and sure enough, they had a couple of Coronas and some off-brand whiskey. I confirm with CVS that they were the suspects, the alcohol was their property, and they are desirous of prosecution. All is good. My states require I take them to the station to book into jail and get fingerprinted. Then they are issued a citation and released with a court date a couple months out. While driving to the station, I ask what they were doing stealing the alcohol. One guy says that they are only 20, and since they weren't old enough to buy it, they would steal it instead. No big deal, young people make stupid mistakes. I get to the jail, book them in, and start filling out the citation. The citation requires both a birth date and age. I do the math on the birthday, and sure enough, the guy is 21, meaning he's old enough for alcohol. I go back into the jail and verify his birthday. Yep, same one he had listed on his driver's license. I redo the math out loud. 21 years old. I ask, "How old are you again?" He replies, 20, sir." I said, "You turned 21 last month." Again, he is adamant, "No, I just turned 20, and I just left it at that. I wonder if the guy was actually thinking that this was just a good defense. Like, he actually didn't think he was 20, but he thought for some reason that if he could convince the cop that he thought he was, then he could get off easier. I don't know. Criminals' minds work in strange ways. Story 16. A little over a month ago, my apartment was broken into whilst my boyfriend was still inside. He works nights, so at midday he's still fast asleep and didn't notice this guy come in and rummage around until he throws the bedroom door open. He panicked at seeing my BF and runs off. My BF looks around the apartment and finds that the laptops, tablets, etc. are still there. He must have run off before getting to all that, but a handful of smaller valuables such as USBs, keys, wallets were gone. He also did a fair amount of damage rummaging around and spray painting our walls. Also ate our biscuits. What was there, however, were the idiot's bags. He'd left his school rucksack containing some schoolwork, some of our possessions, his ID, some years-old school papers with his parents' phone numbers on it, etc. So already he's an idiot and we know who he is. The police are having a laugh with us a little later about it, and as one of them takes my boyfriend's statement, we hear a knock at the door. I go to answer it as a friend said he was coming over anyway, and I find the same guy from the ID outside my door. He looks at me, then the police officer behind me still holding the bags, and asks, "Can I have my bags back, please?" After a stunned moment, he's grabbed by the police officer and my boyfriend confirms that's the guy. He's arrested on the spot. The police said it was the dumbest thing they had ever seen, like something out of a sitcom. It made local news. Story 17. Not a cop, but my kid was on a soccer team and I got friendly with another dad who was a cop. One day after practice, he was dying to tell us a story that had happened the previous week. He and his partner visited an apartment complex, where there had been some robberies. The owners asked the police to come speak to the residents about security, and there were about 15 or 18 people in their meeting room. One middle-aged woman said in a drunk, slurred tone, "Well, if I see someone outside my house, I'm going to get my gun and shoot him." One officer asked, "What kind of gun do you have?" She reached into her purse and pulled out this great big revolver. "Where did you get that?" "My boyfriend gave it to me." "Have you ever shot that thing?" She said no. The cop asked, "Which apartments do you live in?" She said, "My building faces the grocery store." The lead cop said, "Ma'am, what's probably going to happen is since you haven't shot before, you're going to shoot, but you're going to miss and the gun's going to kick up and you're going to shoot high. And your bullet is going to go across the street to the parking lot at the Safeway and you're going to hit somebody putting groceries in their car." She was shocked and sat there with her mouth open. "I didn't know a bullet could go that far." "Yes, ma'am, a bullet from your gun can probably go about a mile." Another guy spoke up. "Yes, ma'am, it'll go through the walls, too." Everyone turned around to look at him. He continued, "A couple years ago, I was trying to unalive myself, so I sat on the toilet, put a gun up to my head, and yes, fired. Just as I did, I put my head down and missed. But the bullet went through the wall. It scared the crap out of someone next door taking a shower." It's kind of impressive that just by OP's story, I can tell what kind of apartment building this was. Although I guess my first clue should have been where there had been some robberies, but still. Story 18. Not a cop, but used to be a Macy's loss prevention guy. We had 3 teens coming in with literally mountains of rubbers in their pockets. Someone came to pick them up, but it wasn't a relative. Macy's policy is if they stole under $100, then they can get picked up. These kids stole about $1,300 worth of clothes. The person who tried to come and pick them up was someone who stole from us before. The fact that this person who came to pick up these kids didn't expect that we were going to be looking for her was frickin' hilarious. Story 19. When it comes to stupid calls, the list is extensive. There's the mother who called because her 6- and 8-year-old sons were fighting over Pokemon cards. There's the lady who called to report feral cats in her home, which turned out to be 2 kittens that were less than a month old. There's the guy who called to report that the ducks in the pond behind his home were snoring and keeping him awake. Admittedly, that was my top winner for a long time. But I feel like early last year, a new winner arose to accept the stupidest call I've ever been to award. The call, which was initially reported by a third party, came out as a disorder in a parking lot. 2 men were outside of their vehicles arguing. Then, while I was on my way, one of the involved parties called and said that a person was blocking him in. Now, that's not too uncommon. Many people make bad decisions. I think blocking someone in is pretty high up there on the bad decision scale, but I've seen it. Someone takes your parking space, which really brings up the argument what makes a parking space yours. Block them in. Did someone cut you off, tailgate you, merge into your lane, or do any other traffic movement that led you to feeling offended? Follow them until they park and block them in. Baby mama drama? Why not argue loudly outside and block her in so she can't leave before you have a chance to fully express how upset you are? Boss didn't pay you on time? Block his car in with yours until he pays you. It's sure to work. But see, what people don't realize is 2 things. The person being blocked in isn't really blocked in, because they could get out of their car and walk away. In fact, the aforementioned boss exited his car, went into his office, and called the police to report that he was being detained and kidnapped. The other thing that people frequently forget is that there are millions of guns in the US, and a vast amount of them in my state alone. And the worst thing you can do to someone who is already emotional and angry is to corner them. It's much wiser to park elsewhere, note the plate, and call the police. Or evaluate the situation in your head, so you can decide whether it's really worth your time, effort, and frustration, because they merged in front of you, oh no. Or maybe, just maybe, you could head home to your family, have a glass of wine, and watch the Modern Family Marathon. But back to my call. As I'm driving, I'm speculating on the possible options I could be facing on my arrival. I pull into the parking lot. It's a grocery store parking lot with an L-shaped strip mall of the anchor store, and numerous smaller businesses on each side, along with a gas station on the corner, a freestanding auto parts store, and a chain restaurant that serves pancakes of the international variety. The parking lot is sizable with lanes adjacent to parking stalls, along with the access roads that run through the lot to allow ingress and egress. Fairly close to the center of the lot, I see them. A Corvette and a lifted pickup truck. It's what is basically a T-shaped intersection in the parking lot. The wider road, I use that term because I don't know what the drivey parts of parking lots are called, is running north-south, from the public roadway to the front of the storefronts. The smaller road tees off of that to the west, and eastbound cars have a stop sign. Now understand that traffic law doesn't exist on private property, at least in my state or any other state I know of. The only thing we enforce are DUI, reckless driving, or hit and run. That's it. Stop signs on private lots are merely suggestions. The Corvette is on the east-west roadway facing east, about 15 feet back from the stop sign. The truck is primarily on the north-south roadway, in the midst of a right turn onto the east-west. My first assumption is that it was a private property collision, and the drivers both got upset and started arguing. But as I exit my patrol car, neither seem to have damage. I contact the first driver of the truck. He tells me that he's headed toward the grocery store. He starts to turn right toward the parking area. His truck is so large and the roadway is so small that in order to negotiate the turn, he takes up both lanes of traffic. As he's turning, the driver of the Corvette comes up from the west and refuses to yield while he finishes his turn. He stops in the eastbound lane and refuses to back up. I clarify, there was no collision. I contact the driver of the Corvette. He tells me that he's trying to leave the lot. He is driving eastbound through the parking lot toward the larger road that takes him to the exit. As I approach the stop sign, the driver of the truck comes whipping around the corner and into his lane. The driver of the truck refuses to yield to him and refuses to back up. Once again, I clarify, no collision. In speaking to them further, I learn that this hadn't just occurred either. The traffic snafu occurred, and initially both the drivers remained in their cars, trying to win the Mexican standoff. Approximately 10 minutes later, the wife of the truck driver gets aboard and exits the truck to enter the grocery store. Give or take 10 minutes after that, both drivers exit and begin to argue with each other over who needs to back up and yield to the other. At that point, someone called the police, and it took me just over 5 minutes to get there. So here we are playing Billy Goat's Gruff for nearly 30 minutes. And to top it off, neither vehicle was blocked in. Either driver could have reversed out of the situation and gone on their way. But that's not how you win a dong measuring contest now, is it? Upon realizing that the only crime that was being committed was that both of these guys could possibly reproduce, I did the following. I clarified that absolutely no crime was being committed. I pointed out the situation was so ridiculous that even one guy's wife wanted out of it. I told them both that I've met kindergartners with more maturity, and they deserved every minute of wasted time they were spending here, but I wouldn't be a part of it. I suggested that they should find reverse, unless they were too childish to understand how cars worked. I turned and laughed out loud all the way back to my patrol car. I left and got Starbucks. To this day, I still can't fathom two middle-aged men stopping in a parking lot for 30 minutes because each one felt they had a perceived right-of-way that didn't exist. Well, if you don't drive, then that was probably very confusing and it meant nothing. So, sorry about that. It was also very long and kind of a marathon for me too. So, we're gonna end the video here. Thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed. Have a good rest of your day or night.